Welcome back to the AtroKraft Satisfactory Megabase project. In the last episode, we wrapped up our supplies factory, secured alternate recipes with a big hard drive hunt, and laid down the production lines for our Phase 3 space elevator parts. With power stabilized and the elevator unlocked, we're ready to push into the next big milestone. And that means oil. Phase 3 opens up the door to a whole new tier of resources. And while oil eventually leads into advanced plastics, fuel, and heavy industrial parts, the immediate goal is much simpler. We just need a steady stream of rubber and plastic to keep our research unlocks and future builds moving. To start, we set up a temporary oil outpost. Nothing fancy, just pumps, refineries, and simple lines producing rubber and plastic. All of it was tied straight into dimensional storage, giving us access to these essentials anywhere on the map. It's not a permanent solution, but it's the bridge that carries us into the real mid-game. But in Satisfactory, one project rarely stays in its own lane. That first oil outpost solved the immediate need, yet quickly snowballed into more work. Rubber and plastic kept research moving, but other bottlenecks popped up just as fast. Before long, we were spinning multiple plates at once, with half-finished builds scattered across the map. To keep things clear, I'm going to walk through what happened next in a cleaner order than it played out live, because in the moment it was chaos. One of those side projects was the beginning of our preliminary train network. To prepare for it, we built an entire floor underneath the supplies factory and dropped into it 2 stations that will become supply stations for the larger permanent oil factory. These aren't running yet, but by putting them in place now, we save ourselves the pain of tearing into existing builds down the line. Now, with the station set, we placed our very first blueprint maker and used it to design a multi-purpose train line support. These will add a lot of functionality to the network, handling signals, carrying lights, and even including a hypertube and a detached power line that stays detached from the rail itself. The result will be a cleaner, more useful rail system that's easier to maintain and expand as the network grows. From that first station, we began running track in both directions, east up the Great Canyon and west along our coal plant where the line splits to the north and the south. I'm generally following the major routes of the game and dropping intersections ahead of time in any place I think expansion might make sense. It's forward planning, laying down the bones of a network that will carry the megabase for the long haul. By this point, the megabase was already straining the grid. The supplies factory alone consumed nearly 2/3 of our available power. And with bigger projects on the horizon, it was obvious we needed to get ahead of the curve. That meant stepping beyond fuel entirely and going straight into the next tier, Turbofuel. Before laying a single foundation, we pulled up the plan in Satisfactory Modeler to make sure the math checks out. The target was to take the full output of 1/300 a minute normal oil node and push it through diluted fuel, then turbofuel. Along the way, the extra polymer resin would simply be sunk for now, keeping the ratios clean. The end product would feed a massive generator array designed for over 22,000 megawatts uncharted. To make the diluted fuel stage manageable, I built a blueprint module for each refinery. Instead of manually juggling containers, each module runs on a closed loop. 2 packagers pass water and empties back and forth automatically, while the refinery sits between them. From the outside, it looks like a simple pipe in and out, no clutter, no extra micromanagement. The system not only works efficiently, but it looks sharp and scales neatly across the line. For the turbofuel itself, we paired that stream with compacted coal. The compacting was handled on-site at the plant, but the raw inputs, coal and sulfur, had to be brought in by train. This marked the base's first full-scale rail operation, and it wasn't a small lift. The coal plant required 533 per minute of both coal and sulfur. The coal was simple enough, but the sulfur forced us to pull from 2 different stations, one of which had previously fed the coal plant. Once the turbofuel plant came online, that line was permanently redirected here. To actually bring the plant online though, we had to solve another challenge: startup power. A build this size doesn't just turn on by itself. The production chain has to work through crude, diluted fuel, compacting, and finally into Turbofuel before the generators can feed any power back into the grid. To bridge that gap, we designed and built multi-level battery banks encased in concrete foundations. A few of these provided enough reserve capacity to carry the startup load. By combining that stored energy with selective, partial activation of the generators, we were able to push fuel through the system step by step until the chain stabilized. Once running, we went a step further to eliminate any blips on the graph. We temporarily disconnected the Turbofuel inputs from the generators and allowed the entire production chain to backfill its buffers. Every refinery ran until the Turbofuel storage was full. When we finally reconnected the lines, the remaining pipes filled quickly and every generator came online. Fully backed up, every buffer maxed, the plant was humming at capacity. On top of that, we diverted that excess polymer resin into making containers on site, which then fed into packagers. A portion of both fuel and turbofuel was stored in dimensional storage, giving us reserves for jetpacks and vehicles. Since these buffers only fill intermittently, they don't interfere with the plant's calculated throughput. The finished plant was a sight to see. 90 fuel generators all humming together in formation, designed for a total of 22,000 megawatts. Pipes fed in from every angle, packing loops clicked away in sync, and it's a factory you can't take in with just one glance. For the first time, walking through the build felt like stepping into a true industrial complex. This was the moment the project really started to feel mega, on a completely different scale from anything we'd built before. It's worth pausing here just to take it all in. The scale, the organization, and how far we've come since the starter factories. For perspective, we started this series nursing a few hundred megawatts through leaf burners. Now, even at partial utilization, this array carries more power than everything before it combined. The curve stopped being linear a while ago. This is where it turns steep. With Turbofuel in place, the Megabase finally had the breathing room to grow without constantly babysitting power. With Turbofuel online and the grid finally stable, it was time to circle back to another critical piece of infrastructure, a permanent rubber and plastic factory. The temporary oil outpost had served its purpose, but the Megabase needed something far more robust to carry us forward. Just like before, we started with the numbers in Satisfactory Modeler. On the screen you can see the plan, 2 separate production blocks, each pulling from a full 300 crude per minute. One side dedicated to plastic, the other to rubber. Both rely on the diluted fuel recipe, just like we used in the Turbofuel plant. The trick here is how we handle the byproducts. Every refinery cycle produces a mix of what we want and what we don't. Plastic and rubber are tied together like that. Instead of letting the excess back up, we built a recycling loop. Any undesired type is automatically fed back into its partner line, steadily converting the waste into usable product. Keeps the whole system balanced and means that production of one resource is not dependent on the other, allowing us to fully utilize every drop of crude. One key difference from the Turbofuel plant is how we handle the water packaging. Since this factory sits high above the sea level, pumping water all the way up here from below would have been messy and inefficient. Instead, we split the packaging out into its own section, trading water and empty containers between the refinery blocks from below. It keeps the lines clean, simplifies the flow, and saves us from a ton of unnecessary plumbing. Elevation was the whole reason for that split. Pumping headlift up to the petrochem floor would have meant booster pumps every few segments, creating a huge unnecessary power draw and many new fail points. Packaging water down below and feeding it up to containers turned the problem into pure logistics. Belts and loaders, fewer pumps, and fewer failure points. Once everything was built, we stress tested the outputs by hooking them into sinks. The numbers came close to spec, but not quite perfect. The bottleneck wasn't the recipe, it was the belts. Until we upgrade to Mark V, the full 900 per minute of both rubber and plastic won't flow end to end. Still, even at reduced throughput, the factory produces more than enough to keep our unlocks and builds humming along. With the petrochemicals flowing, it's a good moment to zoom back out and take stock of it all. Looking at the map now, the picture is very different from when we started this episode. The supplies factory is humming along, the Turbofuel array has flattened out our power graph, and the rubber and plastic plant is turning what used to be a bottleneck into a steady stream of resources. Piece by piece, the Megabase is starting to look less like scattered outposts and more like a unified machine. And this is only the beginning. Next time, the focus shifts to logistics on a truly massive scale. We'll be extending the rail network deep into new biomes, building a colossal train trestle that will span the entire Spire Coast and which will become the backbone of the network that will connect every corner of the map. From there, we start on the most ambitious project yet when we begin to lay the groundwork for the new centerpiece of the entire Megabase, the Parthenon in the Dune Desert, a monumental replica structure that will house the endgame supplies factory. But that's all to come. For now, I want to thank you for watching episode 3 of the AtroKraft Satisfactory Megabase project. If you enjoyed the program we made today, don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out the Twitch streams where all this happens live. We'll see you in the next one.